Welcome to the Dream, Plan, Start, Grow podcast hosted by Allison Turner. In each episode, we interview real, everyday entrepreneurs to learn how they got their start, what challenges they faced and overcame when starting the business, and what successes each has had. Welcome to the Dream, Plan, Start, Grow show. My name is Allison Turner. I am your host. The reason I started this show is really to educate people that either want to start a business or maybe are in the early stages of business ownership on the different challenges that other business owners have. I interview different types of entrepreneurs in all different industries to share their experience and how they got started and what challenges and successes they had early on and what they may be able to share to help others. Today, my guest is Dr. Hepsharat Amadi.
Oh, you did that very well.
Okay. I said it right. That's good.
Yep.
So we've met years ago, I know, and then kind of lost touch, and then we're both in the same masterminds that we've reconnected more recently. And I've always been fascinated by kind of the holistic world of medicine, even though I've never seen a holistic doctor, but I've always read up on it. And
it's the first time for everything.
Yeah, no, I was reading up on your website, so I know you got your medical degree first, and then you were practicing more the Western side of medicine, it looked like, and then you went into, you kind of branched out on your own and went towards more the holistic side. So what fascinated you by that?
Well, I never thought that Western medicine was the be-all and end-all, so I've been asked many times by my patients if I suddenly had an epiphany and a light bulb went off over my head and I said, oh, I'm going to go holistic. No, it was never like that. I never went into medicine thinking that it was the only way to deal with things, but especially since I was most interested in disease prevention and health optimization, and I knew that medical school and residency wouldn't give me the tools to do that, but they would also give me a very useful foundation. So I was holistic minded from before I went to medical school, and it was just a process of acquiring the right tools to be able to help people optimize their health, because in medical school, they don't teach you that. They teach you to manage disease, but not how to optimize health.
Right. I think that's one of the main issues I see as a big problem with the Western medicine and even our insurance industry. I know my insurance companies stopped paying for chiropractic right now because it's not medically necessary.
Well, I'll tell you an interesting thing about that. Most people don't know this, but back in the 1950s, the American Chiropractic Association sued the American Medical Association for unfair restriction of trade and won.
Wow.
Okay, so most medical doctors would never refer a patient to a chiropractor no matter what was going on with them, And actually part of my role as a holistic functional doctor is to help my patients to know which other avenues, whether it's chiropractic, acupuncture, homeopathy, herbalism, colon hydrotherapy, which therapies they also need beyond the therapies that I do. Because one of the great things about natural medicine is that it's synergistic. If you deal with a bunch of good practitioners, the whole of their results is more than the sum of its parts.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's so true. But do you find there's a barrier for some patients to see you? Because obviously insurance, I know you don't take insurance, and I know even if you did take insurance a lot of times it's not going to pay for this type of
it won't pay for it
treatment anyway.
It won't pay for it.
So
and that's why I really can't, is because they would say what I'm doing is not medically necessary. And what they define as medically necessary is medication or surgery needed to manage a disease. I hope to prevent people from needing medication or surgery, so I'm doing things that are preventive. They don't want to acknowledge that preventive care can actually cultivate health, so they would just say it's medically unnecessary and not pay for it. But I think that the system has designed it so that it's very hard for most people to be able to pay for so-called health insurance and holistic care. So usually most people have to wind up making a choice.
Wow.
Even I myself actually do not have any health insurance, do not want to have any health insurance because they would only be willing to pay for things that I don't want. And the things that I do want, I can pay for those because those are relatively inexpensive. And I'm not saying that my choice would be appropriate for everybody, but the last time that I had health insurance was when I was still pregnant, because that was the last time that they could offer me something that I might want, which is a C-section.
Right.
As soon as my last child was born vaginally, drop that like a hot potato. And I've paid for all my health care ever since,
Wow.
my chiropractic care, my colonics, whatever else that I do that's holistic, even buying organic food, I mean, what a concept, buying food with no toxins in it, I mean, this is something that the system makes incrementally harder for people to do. And a lot of people not knowing the difference
Right.
and being told that it is the same, which is a lie, a lot of them will just say, well, you know what, I can't really afford to eat organic,
Right.
because it costs a little more, but this country is making the choice to make its citizens make that choice. And there are other countries in the world where, everything is grown organically.
Really?
Yes.
I don't think I
Only
didn't know
one
that.
other country that I know of, and I'm forgetting now which one it is, but I've been to other countries and their food is much better than here, much fresher, much tastier, and grown in much more healthy ways. And that's another reason why so many Americans have trouble losing weight, is because the food they're eating contains toxins that are messing up their liver and that are making it harder for them to lose weight. But you see, unfortunately, the system is set up to make money. So the more people that are sick and that are having chronically managed illnesses, the more money the system makes. It doesn't make money when people are very healthy and don't need medications, don't
Right.
need hospitalizations, don't need to see their doctors more than every so often electively, So I've chosen not to so much try to make money, but rather to do the best job that I can by the patients that I see. And that's the reason why I'm in private practice, really, is because I realized that as long as I was still working for other people, I would have to abide by what they thought the patients should get, not what I thought they should get. So that's the main reason why I went into private practice, because I'm not an entrepreneur by any stretch of the imagination.
You have to be something.
No, it was entirely forced. And you know what? I'll tell you a quick story about that. The way that it happened was that this clinic that I was working for at one time was sold to another clinic, and I was supposed to be working in this second clinic as well, which was the same place. And the second clinic owner bounced, 1 month's worth of checks to me.
Oh.
And I said to him, you know what? I can't afford to work for free. So either you give me a check, that cashes, or I'm going to have to leave. And then when he, made plain that he really wasn't going to do that, then I had to decide, well, what am I going to do?
Right.
Am I going to stay here hoping that one day he'll pay me? That's not an option.
No.
Am I going to leave and find another employer who is going to, give me some of the same kinds of problems I've had with previous employers? Not that they were all bad, but they were not totally satisfactory. Or am I going to branch out on my own and do something that I've never done before, have no aptitude towards necessarily, no training in, no orientation, and and where I know that a lot of other business owners and medical doctors who have far more experience in practice than I did at that time, were going out of business. But I finally decided, you know what, if I don't do this now, when will I ever do it? Because at that point I had spent 11 years after residency working for other people.
Wow.
So I'd been around that block a few times.
And I think, it sounds like you were kind of forced into it to some degree, but you also made the best choice for where you saw you could help the most.
Well, what really was a stroke of fortune in my favor is that an acquaintance of mine who was a chiropractor herself, she had an office close to, where I live, and she spent a lot of time traveling and teaching. So she said to me, like a year or two before this whole crisis kicked off, she said, would you be interested in sharing office space with me? You can build up your own private practice. And so I had already started coming there in the evenings to see a few patients. And she just made it as easy as possible to segue in. She wasn't charging me rent in the beginning. And then as my practice grew up, she started charging me more rent, which was fine. So that kind of made it so that I already had something that I could develop to fall back on in that time.
Right.
I was really blessed.
And I think that's important to note that, as someone starting in business, sometimes people are forced. I mean, I've interviewed a couple people that either had gotten let go, during the pandemic, because that industry shut down, like an event planner company obviously shut down because there were no events early on, things like that, or someone else who wasn't expecting to get let go of a job and just suddenly did. And, the kind of opportunities fell into place where he started a business with two other people.
COVID interrupted a lot of stuff.
Right.
And forced some other people to do some different things.
One of the reasons I started this podcast was to educate people on different forms of entrepreneurship and owning a business, because I feel like even in 2022, we are still in a place where people are leaving companies. Companies are forcing people to go back in the office. They've gotten that taste of working from home and they've chosen not to go back in the office. They've chosen to go out on their own. They've chosen to, seek something better. They've reevaluated. Maybe they lost someone close to them in the last 2.5 years. They've reevaluated their life and whether they really want to do whatever the career is that they were doing, or working, like in your case, working for someone else and not really finding as much fulfillment as maybe working for yourself and being able to go in your own path. I think you bring up good points as, in this country specifically, and I can't speak for other countries necessarily, although you've probably done more research on it, is everything in the more holistic and disease preventative side is so expensive, or more expensive.
It's actually not.
But it's more expensive than not, let's just say. I mean, because if you have a choice between, if a family has a choice between organic and non-organic, and we typically buy, try and buy most of what we buy in organic, and I have to seek that out because, Publix isn't really a big organic store.
No,
they have a
but
few
it's
things.
much more than it ever used to be.
Yeah, much more.
Much
but
more.
Trader Joe's is good. Obviously Fresh Market, Whole Foods, things like that. But you have to kind of seek it out. Costco's done a really good job of bringing more and more organic into their store. But you have to seek it out and you have to be very intentional.
Yes, but you know
it.
what? That's happening more and more. There's a gradual sea change where people are choosing and they're voting with their wallets. And this is the reason why places that never used to carry any organic produce now do. And even though their selection may not be as wide as other places, but it's getting wider and wider all the time. And you can even find decent food at airports nowadays, which is something that you never used to be able to find. But, I take issue with your saying that holistic care is more expensive, because it's way cheaper. It's just that people regard their health insurance premiums as something that must be paid. So even though they may be paying $1,000 a month, $1,000 would buy a lot of holistic care.
Right.
If people were spending that $1,000 on holistic care, then they'd have plenty of money to spend. But the thing that makes the difference is that in people's minds, that's necessary, whereas holistic care is optional. They don't realize that it's an investment in yourself. And, I laugh sometimes when people tell me the prices of some drugs that they are paying for monthly. And it's like, wow, that would be like many, many visits in a month, but they feel that it's absolutely necessary, and so they're going to pay it. But I can tell you that holistic care is always the cheapest because prevention is always cheaper than cure. It's always cheaper.
No, you make a great point.
And better.
Yes.
And more fun.
No, you make a great point.
Uh-huh.
Because I think you're right. And I think that's part of the issue with the backward system we have is that it's not preventative. And so then you see the premiums continue to go up and you see the pharmaceutical industry continue to make a ton of money.
They literally have people by the throat.
Right.
There are some people who are on medications that I was just reading today about, how they voted not to cap the price of insulin. Well, if you need insulin, you've got to have it. Yeah. And, you'll be willing to pay. You'll be willing to go without food, go without shelter, sometimes go without clothes to be able to afford to get it. And in this country, I just feel that that's wrong. We have enough money to pay for everybody who needs insulin to have it. But healthcare in this country is not considered to be a right. It's considered to be a privilege. So if you can afford it, then you can have it. And if you can't afford it, well, too bad for you.
So what if someone drops health insurance? Like my premium just went up to.
It depends on the person.
Right.
And
so you wouldn't just advocate that for everyone. Obviously.
No, absolutely not. That's the whole thing too about holistic healthcare. It's not a one size fits all.
Right.
Because I am a medical doctor, if a patient still needs to be on medications, I can refill those medications, and I can even work with them on weaning them down off medications, which most conventional doctors don't believe can be done, but it usually can be, given enough time.
Yeah.
But everybody's in a different situation, and some people really actually wouldn't be able to afford all of the disease management that they need without insurance. And so for them, they better have that insurance, but there are a lot of people, particularly, younger people, who, if they are given enough of the right holistic care, they might never be in any kind of crisis situation where they need, health insurance.
Okay.
And by the way, I just have to say that health insurance is really a misnomer. It's no more it no more ensures that you are well than life insurance ensures that you live. It's just a nicer way of saying disease management insurance, because that's really all it is. And don't expect it to do more for you than that. And that's very important. You want to have your disease managed if you have disease, but if you don't have disease, you would even much prefer not to have disease. And, health insurance is not going to do that for you. No. To prevent you having disease. Actually, what they would call prevention is actually so-called early monitoring, but it's not really even early monitoring. So, for example, the whole situation with breast cancer, they call it breast cancer prevention by just encouraging women to get, mammograms, but that doesn't actually prevent them from getting breast cancer. It just may discover that they already have it earlier. That's all, which is still good, but there are better ways to do that.
Okay.
I'm more for thermography, but I'm just using that as an example of things that are called, disease prevention that are actually just disease detection.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's true, because I know, I know I've looked into it. I know Jack has studied it more extensively probably than I have, of what our country has kind of put into place, or, what's developed over time and gotten worse probably over time. I think my premium just went up to $600 and something a month, and I'm, knock on wood, healthy. I rarely use it. I go to see my doctor twice a year and do blood work and, the typical stuff. And
I mean, that's usually the best possible scenario with health insurance, is that you don't have to use it.
yeah. And I see
If
my
you have to use
chiropractor,
it-
which pays for some of it. And now
Uh-huh.
they've decided they don't want to pay anymore because it's not medically necessary. So, and that's about, not going to, those are the only people I've seen this year, is those two people, thankfully. But, I think some people may be concerned if something, and I understand where you're coming from, is obviously if you, have your health, then you're not going to have the massive heart attack or the stroke or whatever that people have that concern with, of having insurance to pay for the hospital coverage and whatnot. I think that's the, everything's based on fear in the medical system anyway.
That's the whole thing. It's kind of like a protection racket. They're saying, look, if you don't have this, then something dire is going to happen to you, and then
Right.
you won't be able to pay for it. And in America, that's a whole thing. There's whole bunches of people who are in medical debt that they don't see any way of being able to pay off before they die. And that's just a shame to me. In the richest country in the world, why people should
Right.
have to live in fear of that. But you see, we're being taught that we can't control our health. We're being taught that our health is only determined mainly by two factors. One is genetics, which of course we can't control. And then the other is what germs we're exposed to, which, we can control to some degree, but not completely. But those are not the main determinants of illness. The main determinant of illness is stress. And that's something that, most medical doctors' offices don't do anything about, except maybe prescribe patients anxiolytics like Xanax, which only makes them more toxic and addicted over time. So, for what I use, the quantum biofeedback device, there are programs on it that can just reduce your stress at the click of a mouse. And if it could only do that, it would be well worth it, I think. But it can do so much more. The other thing is making people aware of their risk factors, because you'd be surprised at how many people don't even know that they're stressed.
Right.
Because it's so chronic for them. It's like a background noise or smell that's always there, and so therefore they don't consciously notice it anymore. And you can't manage something that you don't notice.
No.
So
how does, I read a little bit on your website about quantum biofeedback, but I've heard the term before, but that's about the extent of what I know
well,
about
you're
it.
ahead of most people, because most people have never heard of it.
No?
No, and it's not quite the same as conventional biofeedback, although it contains some of the same programs as conventional biofeedback, which teach a person how to become aware of certain processes that are normally automatic, like heart rate and blood pressure and brain waves, so as to learn to control them. This program has those kinds of features in it too, but I hardly ever use those. The ones that I use the most have to do with showing me what's going on electromagnetically with that patient. And in Western medicine, we only monitor what's going on electromagnetically with two organs: the brain with the EEG machine and the heart with the EKG machine.
Right.
Other than that, in Western medicine, we have no idea of what's going on electromagnetically with our patients, and we don't do anything about it. We can't afford to ignore the electromagnetic aspects when it comes to the brain or the heart, because if you went to a doctor complaining of chest pain and they didn't do an EKG, you would think, well, what's up with this? This is really not the standard of care. But unfortunately, most doctors have no idea what's going on with us electromagnetically. And I like to give an analogy to how the quantum biofeedback device works that I think most people can relate to, and that is when you take your car into the dealership, they will often hook your car up to their computer so that they can check to see whether your car's circuits are functioning properly. Well, our human body has circuits, we're electromagnetic, and that's where everything starts. So if you optimize the electromagnetic functioning, then the biochemical functioning will follow, and then the physical structure will follow. So that's why I like to get in on the ground floor of change, because I'm most interested in not only disease prevention, but health optimization, which you can really do with quantum biofeedback.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
So how do you get your patients? I mean, I'm sure you've had some for a long time since you've been in practice for 20 plus years, but like how do you get new patients? Like how do they find out about you? Do people refer you at this point?
Well, I would say that maybe, 40 to 60% of my new patients come from referrals.
Okay.
But I also used to get a lot of patients from Natural Awakenings magazine, which I've advertised in for 20 plus years in South Florida, and a lot of people who are interested in holistic stuff will be reading that. But actually more lately, I've started to get more of my patients from, social media and Facebook,
Okay.
which is
That's good.
fun and it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's free.
Yeah.
Well, she's doing ads, but I'm guessing that they're following you maybe or.
Yep, some of them are, and some of them hear about me through my Facebook ads, but it's kind of a nice mix of new patients that are, and some of them actually just do an old-fashioned Google search for holistic medical doctor or functional medical doctor. Sometimes maybe with my area, maybe that's the modern day thing to do. So
Right.
I'll say half of my patients do that, and then the other half is by referral.
Okay.
And then the other half is people like you that I meet, in various groups that I attend with sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
Did you have any problem when you first went out on your own getting new patients? Like when you were brand new, obviously had starting from zero.
Some of my patients actually followed me from the offices where I had been working. Not that many, because I don't see that many patients in a day, and I was only working there part-time at night. But again, if you do a good job with a patient, then they might tell their friend or relative to come see you. So it gradually grows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I don't get to see that many patients a day. Like an average day for me might be 6 patients.
Wow.
The average day for most medical doctors who are working in a setting where they're, accepting insurance and so on is 20 to 40 patients a day. And each patient gets 7 minutes or less.
Yeah.
My shortest visit is like half an hour.
Okay.
That's my shortest.
Yeah, I was just talking to my mother who's up in Indianapolis, and she's in her 80s, and she was complaining about she had called into her doctor's office and tried to get the nurse's station, which is like people you can actually talk to, and then she got voicemail, and then she didn't leave a message, and she's like, and even when I go and see him, like, I see her for like 2 seconds, and I said, yeah, and that's the problem with medical system is, insurance pays less, based on whatever the contracted rate is. They've got medical malpractice insurance they have to pay, and that number keeps accelerating, and so they have to keep seeing more patients in order to basically make ends meet, per se.
Right. And what patients don't understand about insurance, especially HMO insurance, is that those doctors are paid per capita, per patient, per month, regardless of whether those patients ever set foot in the door or not.
Really?
So it's yes. So it's actually, in the doctor's best interest that the patients don't even come in, because if they're being paid regardless,
they don't have to do anything.
Then,
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, that's one of the reasons why I can't do that. So they don't really care if you call their office and, you're not able to speak to a live human,
right.
They
still get
because
their money.
They're still getting paid, whereas with me, not only am I not paid for by insurance, but if my patients are not happy with the care that I give them, they'll go elsewhere, and I don't blame them.
Yeah.
But actually they seem to feel pretty good about it because they keep on coming back and they keep on referring their friends and family. So I have to try to keep them happy by giving them the best care, because they're the ones who are paying the bill.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And when you first started this practice, and I think it was like 2001, is that
Yes,
right?
yeah.
What were your biggest challenges when you started?
Just fear, because I was like, okay, I'm about to do something that I've never done before in a very challenging and competitive environment. And really, I'm fortunate, because the thing that I love to do is still relatively rare. There are
Right.
not that many functional medical doctors out there, so I really don't feel that I have that much competition. And there is nobody out there who is actually a medical doctor who is doing their practice based around quantum biofeedback like I am. So, I really, don't feel like I have any other competition. If I were more conventional and starting a practice, then that would be a whole other kettle of fish. But
Right.
still, doing something that you've never done before when your family's livelihood is on the line is scary. And it's not even like I was coming from a family where my parents had been self-employed. They were working for other people as well. So
Right.
some people have come from families where, there's a previous experience of self-employment, but I was like,
None of that.
none of that, and whatever little they taught us about practice management. I remember we had a month of practice management in the last year of medical residency, and anything that they taught us during that time was already outdated by the time we graduated. So it was like, pushing us into the ocean and saying, well, sink or swim.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've heard that about medical practices just in general. Medical
Yeah.
practices that, there is zero taught in medical school.
No.
About
And it
how
keeps
you actually run a medical practice. And
Yeah, it
obviously with
keeps
the
changing
insurance
all the
laws
time.
continuing to change and everything, changing, then they have to figure it out or hire someone that can figure it out because they're too busy seeing like the 20 to 40 patients or whatever you said a day. So they can't be the ones figuring it out.
It's totally changed, and it keeps on changing. And, when you think about the fact that when I graduated residency in 1990, use of computers to do all sorts of things was not at all as common as it is now. So
Right.
we've not only had to adapt to new models of, so-called healthcare delivery, but also new models of public relations and marketing. I knew nothing about marketing. I mean, nothing. I didn't even really have any interest in marketing because, I didn't really even have that much interest in making money, to tell you the honest truth. I mean, it didn't fascinate me. I just figured, which was wrong, I just figured that, well, if I was a doctor, I'd probably be making enough money to be comfortable. Maybe not wealthy, because I'm not in an operative specialty, but at least enough money
Right.
so that I wouldn't have to worry about keeping a roof over my head. Well, I didn't realize that no matter how good you are at what you do, if nobody knows that,
Right.
it doesn't help you. So, they say it's like winking at a girl in the dark. If she doesn't know what
See
you're
it.
doing, then she
Yeah.
can't respond to that. So, that's the reason why I have joined with other entrepreneur groups, which is where I met Allison, so that I could try to assimilate some of these concepts, which were totally alien to me and, which I had no intrinsic interest in. But I realized that if I didn't at least somewhat master the ideas, then, I might wind up going out of business because I couldn't afford to hire anybody to do this for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that, that's one of the biggest challenges I see with, clients of mine that are starting a business is, they're good at whatever. So you're good at the doctor side of things, but they don't realize when you start a business, guess what? You're now the bookkeeper, you're the marketer, you're the salesperson,
Chief
you're
cook
the,
and bottle washer.
yeah, you're everything initially until you actually get off the ground and make enough money to actually, afford hiring some of those positions out. And sometimes it takes longer and so you figure out what you're good at and then hire the other stuff out once you have the money. But they don't realize that. I mean, I'm reading right now the E-Myth book, and that's one of the big things they talk about is, that technician person, regardless of what you do, they're the ones that are good at whatever the service is. But they don't realize now they have to be the business owner and the manager too, so they have these two things up here. Otherwise, you can't exist and you can't thrive in what you're doing. You probably will go out of business. So every reason you went into business for yourself just went out the window because now you got to learn all this other stuff on top of it.
Well, I just consider myself really fortunate because I know that most new businesses do go out of business, I think within the first 3 years. Is that what they say?
Yeah, I mean, a lot go out in the first year, and then there's another break point at like 3 or 5, and then if you hit that 9, 10, like you've kind of excelled into the, that next level. But
Yeah, but I feel very fortunate because I've been around for 20 plus years. And in the pandemic, the pandemic took out 40% of small Black businesses.
wow,
40%.
Really?
40.
I didn't realize
I
it was
read that in
high.
Forbes.
Oh wow!
So hopefully they know.
Yeah,
And
hopefully.
yet I'm still here. And I think it's only because of the uniqueness of what I do, and
So-
getting good results.
Yeah, how did your patients fare during the pandemic?
Well, actually, my patients did very well. And this might sound really weird, but you can do quantum biofeedback remotely, just
Really?
just like so many things these days, you can do it remotely because we are energy. And so just like tuning a radio to a specific station, you'll get only the frequencies that are coming from that station, even though there are all these other stations out there broadcasting. But if you tune the radio to that station, then you just get that station's broadcast.
Right.
And so when I calibrate the device to somebody, that allows me to tune into their frequencies, and I can actually treat them wherever there are. So I shouldn't say that I was treating COVID remotely, because God forbid what kinds of authorities would come down on me for making that kind of a claim. But I will say that I was improving the frequencies of their immune system. I think I can say that I was harmonizing their vibrations, and most of them did very well, despite the fact that unfortunately, one of my patients, he wasn't really my patient, but he was the husband of one of my patients, actually died during the pandemic. And I had tried to help him, and he was getting better up to a certain point, but then he went into the hospital and subsequently died. So I have found that it makes a really big difference, people's diet. And they don't talk about that over here, but the British Medical Journal published a study in which they said that people who were vegetarians actually had a 72% lower risk of severe COVID, and people who are pescatarians like me had a 59% lower risk of severe COVID. And unfortunately, the people that I saw, some of whom weren't my patients, but I heard about them from their wives who were my patients, when they ate much more poorly, they did much worse with COVID, regardless of whether they were vaccinated or not.
Interesting.
So. But on the whole, I can say that, not one of my patients who saw me with any frequency, because some of my patients only see me once every several years when they want to check in and make sure they're still alive. But, some of my other patients who saw me more regularly, none of them had severe COVID, and none of them have, so-called long COVID.
Right.
And I'm convinced that a lot of that has to do with bioidentical hormone replacement. So I'm on bioidentical hormones. In Western medicine, they never measure hormones, hardly ever. And when they do it in a really incomplete way. And I just saw an interesting case that confirms my hypothesis that a lot of the people who are suffering from long COVID have inadequate hormone production. I saw a young man who was only 30, who had gotten COVID July 1st. I saw him yesterday, and he had not been able to come into the office because he only tested negative for COVID as of last week.
Oh, wow.
So he had had COVID for more than a month.
Wow.
By contrast, I only had COVID for a little over a week, and I'm twice his age. I'm on bioidentical hormones, but, he actually turned out to be deficient in hormones, which I found out during his visit. And, he had some other issues which I felt that they would help. So some people need bioidentical hormones even from much younger than that. But unfortunately, Western medicine will usually not know that, and they will usually not address hormonal insufficiency or imbalance in young people. And when I'm talking about hormones, I'm also talking about adrenal and thyroid hormones. I'm not only talking about male and female hormones, which is what most people would think about when they think about hormones, but adrenal and thyroid hormones are hormones also. And adrenal hormones are really important for immune support. If you're not producing enough cortisol, or if the cortisol that you're producing does not bind to your own receptors well, then you will have incrementally less immune function than you would have if they were. And conventional medicine will never recognize this because they do not do serial saliva tests, which would be the kind of test that you need to do to detect problems here, unless you're using quantum biofeedback, where it can tell me qualitatively that there's a problem, but quantitatively, I'd only be able to know by using a lab test. But you see, cortisol levels are supposed to be very different throughout the day. So what level would be normal in the morning is not a level that would be normal in the afternoon. And so this is the reason why if you just send a person to the lab once during the day to get a cortisol level drawn, regardless of what the level is, it doesn't tell you about what their overall adrenal function is like. And many of us has been so stressed for so long that our cortisol levels are in the toilet, and yet we can go to our conventional medical doctors complaining of fatigue, and they may say, oh, it's just stress, and may offer us some, medication for that, but they don't correct the underlying problem, which is being hypoadrenal, and it can become a vicious circle because being hypoadrenal will cause you more symptoms, and then having symptoms will cause you more stress, and then the more stress will cause you to be more hypoadrenal. So that's where giving the person the kinds of hormones that they need helps to break that vicious cycle.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a couple of last questions. So I know you've been married for a while as well as have 3 kids. Were they supportive of your venture out on your own when all this happened?
Well, I'm the main breadwinner of my family, and when this happened, my children were really too small. I mean, my youngest one was only 1 year old when I went into business for myself, and my oldest one was only, I guess, around 8, so it's not like they could really say, go for it, Mom. They probably didn't even really know what I was doing. I only knew that they still had back. A roof over their head and food and clothes, so, they didn't really know. And my husband has always been holistically oriented, I mean, ever since I met him. Okay. So that was one of the things that I felt good about with him, is because he was always trying within the limits of his knowledge to live a more healthy lifestyle. So certainly he supported that. Okay. Thank God.
Yeah, because I find that's like essential when you go out into business. If you have the one spouse going out and working for themselves, and sometimes, especially as you get started, the hours are longer. You're trying to figure things out, and then the other one either gets jealous or they get resentful. But having them have buy-in is really key in that situation.
Well, I think he knew that holistic medicine had always been my heart. Right. And, I guess he understood that in the beginning, when you have no experience in practice management, you may start off as being an employee, but that maybe later on, when you've had more experience, that maybe then might be the time to branch out and try and do your own thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it sounds like you've had a lot of success over the years.
Well, I would say success in my terms. I'm like not a millionaire, at least in terms of money, but I'm...
Success in keeping patients healthy and not diseased.
I'm a billionaire in terms of satisfaction.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think
each of us
like gauges, exactly. Each of us gauges success in different terms, and it's whatever term it is for you or for me. I don't believe it's always money. To me, it's...
Nah. Money's
you can't
good.
take money with you when you die, so
money's good, and it gives you the opportunity to do a lot of good things. But for me, there is nothing like the experience of knowing that I've helped save a life, or that even I've helped bring a life into being. Because actually, holistic care can actually increase women's fertility as well without
Okay.
IVF or anything. But,
Really?
Yeah, there's a few pregnancies that I've been partially responsible for, indirectly.
Yeah. Hopefully
Yeah.
they wanted the pregnancy. And
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But anyway, yeah.
So
it's
as
been-
we start winding down, I ask this of all my guests, if there was one thing that either you didn't know when you started the business or maybe you found like very helpful in your early success, that might help someone else that's trying to start a business, any kind of business, what would that be?
Boy, that's a tough one there. Because, part of it is just wandering around and making your own mistakes, Hopefully they won't be too costly. But I think the biggest thing that I would say to people is, align yourself with other people who are entrepreneurs and who know more than you do about how this game runs, because what was so scary for me was the idea that I was all alone. It almost was like climbing into the cockpit of a plane that that you don't know how to fly.
Right. You need to take off.
Right, exactly. But aligning yourself with other people who know how to do this and who have been in business with longer than you, helps you to have a different perspective and helps you to have the encouragement that you really need to overcome that fear and feel the fear, but do it anyway.
No, I think you bring up a great point. And one I always talk to people about is, you are alone when you first start, but having
definitely
that,
feel alone.
yeah, exactly. But then definitely finding, either a mentor, finding a group, finding people that are smarter than you in ways that you're not as smart in. So, you're the doctor and you're great in that area, finding people that are good in the marketing arena, all the other pieces to help build that. And not being afraid, because I think that's, fear often stops people from moving forward instead of encouraging them to seek out what those resources might be to, ease that fear.
Yeah, and one thing I would say too is just like everything else in life is changing all the time. So showing up at these, group events and affiliating yourself with the other people who are in the group just can help you continue to change,
Right.
and grow in ways that are necessary, because nothing ever stays the same.
No.
And
Change
nothing
is
ever will
inevitable.
again. So,
Yeah.
and to be open to be a lifelong learner. Yeah,
Yeah. I think that's essential too.
absolutely.
Lifelong learner.
Yep.
So if anyone wanted to either seek you out as a patient or, just reach out from a standpoint of a question, what's the best way to connect? Is it your website, social media? What's the best way to connect?
Well, the website is pretty good. It's www.greatnaturaldoctor, with doctor being spelled out, .com. And then the office phone is also a good way. That's 954-757-0064. And then there's the email, which is just dramadi@dramadi.com. And I also now have started a YouTube channel too.
Oh,
So if you want to search for me under Hepsharat Amadi, then you'll find my little baby YouTube channel.
you got to start somewhere.
That's right. My little toddler YouTube channel.
Well, you got to start somewhere. I find that
Yeah, it's best to start as an acquaintance that I met through one of these entrepreneurs said, you have to start somewhere, and it's better to start small and make mistakes than never do anything at all.
Right. No, absolutely. But thank you for joining me
Oh,
today,
thank you so
Dr.
much
Amadi.
for inviting me. I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it.
So thank you, everyone, for joining the Dream Plan Start Grow show. My name again is Allison Turner. So I'm the founder of Dream Plan Start Grow, which is a business coaching program. I also founded Batcat Media Group. So we love working with entrepreneurs and startups and building from the business side up. And we can do that through branding, everything. So I look forward to seeing everyone again next week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Dream Plan Start Grow podcast with Allison Turner.
If you like what you heard, make sure to subscribe and leave a review. Join the Dream Plan Start Grow community by following us on Facebook or Instagram at Dream Plan Start Grow. See you in the next episode.